Welcome, everyone. My name is Mohammed Hansrod, and I'm going to introduce Professor Soroush. Welcome to this lecture entitled Reason, Freedom, and Democracy in Islam by Professor Abdolkarim Soroush. This Kenyan College lecture is co-sponsored by the Middle East Students Association, the Philosophy, Religious Studies, Asian Studies, History, and International Studies departments, the Islamic Civilizations and Cultures Concentration, and the Provost Office. Professor Abdolkarim Soroush is one of the finest intellectuals and pro-democracy activists in the world. He was born in Tehran, Iran in 1945. After completing his national entrance examinations in Iran, Soroush began studying pharmacy. While in Iran, Professor Soroush also studied Islamic jurisprudence or fiqh, hadith, and Quranic exegesis or tafsir under clerical instruction. He left Iran to pursue a master's degree in analytical chemistry at the University of London, and thereafter opted to study history and philosophy of science at Chelsea College. While he was studying in England, tensions between the Shah's regime and the Iranian people gradually intensified. After the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran, Soroush returned to his home country and there published his book, Danish va Arzesh, Knowledge and Value. He later joined Iran's Teacher Training College. Shortly afterwards, Ayatollah Khomeini directly appointed Soroush to Iran's Cultural Revolution Council, a body that was charged with reopening higher education institutions after they were shut down in that country. Professor Soroush is the author of dozens of books and articles on the subjects of philosophy and mysticism. In the philosophical domain, he writes mainly on Islamic philosophy and the philosophy of science. In the latter subject, he translated a number of major English philosophical works into Persian, including The Metaphysical Foundations of Modern Natural Science by the American philosopher Edwin Arthur Burt. In the field of Islamic mysticism, Soroush studies the mystical poetry of Jalaluddin Rumi and the works of the jurist Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. On religious philosophy, Soroush studies the relationship between religion and politics. Professor Soroush is a former professor at Tehran University and Imam Khomeini International University in Iran. He is also affiliated with a number of prestigious institutions elsewhere, including Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia Universities, and Georgetown University's Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs in the United States, along with the Wissenschaftskolleg in Berlin, Germany. Soroush is a leading critic of the post-revolutionary regime in Iran. In the 1990s in Tehran, he founded the bi-monthly magazine Kian, in which he published controversial articles on religious pluralism and nuanced critiques of the Iranian political system. In 1995, Ayatollah Khomeini's government banned Soroush from lecturing publicly, instructing at universities, and from publishing his works. The American journalist Robin Wright noted that in 1996, on the anniversary of the American embassy hostage crisis, Ayatollah Khomeini spent more time, quote-unquote, condemning Soroush's ideas than lambasting the United States or Israel. Professor Soroush won the Erasmus Prize for his work in 2004 and was listed recently by Time, Prospect, and Foreign Policy magazines as among 100 most influential intellectuals in the world. I would especially like to thank Professor Vernon Schubel, the chair of the Religious Studies Department and the director of the Islamic Civilizations and Cultures Program or Concentration for bringing this event to fruition. Without further ado, I welcome Professor Abdolkarim Soroush to the lectern and to Kenyan College. And I invite you all to join the Middle East Students Association.
Everybody. Greetings to everybody and good evening to everybody. I am most grateful, really, first of all, to God who has made everything possible, in this way, and then of course to the authorities of this college who made this opportunity available to me, and especially the president of Kenan College, and most especially dear Muhammad, who has been instrumental in doing things, and had not been for his adamance and his still insistence, I could not have been able perhaps to make it. I really find myself in my home, although this is the first time I am visiting this college and this village, and I have never been before in Columbus, although I have been in Ohio State, and especially in Cleveland. Cleveland, I remember it because one of the most important and finest experiments in physics took place there, measuring the velocity of light and the constancy of the velocity of light. That was established late 19th century, and the theory of relativity of Einstein was based on that. So Ohio State is very proud of that particular piece of history of science that eventually led to one of the most important theories in physical sciences. Anyway, I find myself in my home among the students, among colleagues, and distinguished and dear scholars and professors here. And although I arrived here last night, less than 24 hours I am here, but it has been for me much more than 24 hours, in terms of receiving students and speaking to them and having good time here. So I believe this place, I'm sure, with a very sweet memory of all of you, and I hope that I might be able to continue the cooperation with this college and the students, and to continue friendship. This is only the beginning of my friendship with the people of this college, and I hope it will not be the end of it. Okay, now the topic of the lecture I'm going to deliver here, of course, is suggested by Muhammad himself. And it is not suggested by him, it is actually the title of my book, which was published in 2000 by Oxford University Press. And there also the topic is not mine, it is suggested by the Oxford University Press. And, the title I suggested was different, but because of some marketing reasons, indeed, they suggested that this should be the title which is more exotic. And I think they were right, because the book was for some time popular. So it was republished and so on and so forth. So yes, that is where market comes into science, into knowledge, and there has been always a link between the two, but sometimes it's much more open, much more conspicuous and useful. So this is the title they used. Of course, it is a good one, except that it contains, a number of such lofty concepts like freedom, democracy, reason, Islam. Every one of these things actually is a very, very big thing to tackle. And so I have to be very content with giving you a brief introduction to each one of them. And I'm sure that you diligent students, you will have time, for those of you who are really interested in the subject, to go and to, look for it and study it for yourself. Now, of course, it is a very timely topic as well, because we are living in a very turbulent time, especially in the Middle East. And as far as I remember, I am now about 70 years old, so I have got enough experience to tell you that Middle East has never been like this before, at least in my lifetime. Since the fragmentation of the Ottoman Empire in 1917, this is the first deep crisis that we face and we feel in the Middle East. I deliberately mentioned the fragmentation of Ottoman Empire in the aftermath of the First World War, because the fragmentation created a number of artificial countries, a number of artificial boundaries. So the seed of crisis was there. And now you see that they are now opening up, they are coming up, and they are showing themselves. They were hidden, they were underground. The most open one, actually, or the most open wound was, of course, the conflict between Palestine and Israel. But that was not the only one. So you had the same thing, more or less, in other places. And when, for example, you see Iraq, which is virtually divided now into 3 countries. So it has never been a country like this. So it was prone, to be disintegrated. And heaven forbid, if these people who are call themselves Daesh or Al-Khilafah Islamiyya, if they win the case and if they are victorious, so we will have virtually a different Middle East in future, which is a tragedy over time. I am sorry, and we are all sorry, that unfortunately the 21st century has got a very bad omen. The beginning has been so far very bloody and very tragic and very catastrophic, and who knows, and God knows the future. But if that is the beginning, we usually say the beginning of the year tells you a lot about the end, the rest of the year. So hopefully, let us pray that that tragedy may not happen. Otherwise, it will be bad for the whole world, not only the Middle East area. Now, what is the relationship between the Middle East and our topic? Is that in the Middle East, actually Islam is involved. And the Daesh group, the people who claim that they are going to renew Al-Khilafah Islamiyya, Islamic Khilafah, and they would like to have an Islamic rule all over the world, or at least all over the Arab land or Islamic land. They are claiming to be good Muslims, to be pure Muslims, to be Muslims, their Islam, according to them, is very pure, very fundamental, and very original. And they neither like Islamic philosophy nor Islamic mysticism. They think that all these, unwanted additions to Islam, they are corruption, they are pollutions, if you like. So one has to remove them, one has to eradicate them, and go back to the first pure sources of Islam. And this is their claim, this is their pretension. But when you look at their action is like this, as you say, just amputating legs and chopping hands and beheading people, and unfortunately claiming all this on Islam and on their Prophet action. Therefore, this is the link between the Middle East crisis at the time we are living in and the idea of Islam and the Islamic teaching, which is at stake. And unless we clarify ourselves and we enlighten our mind and we go deep in order to study Islam, sometimes we might be the victim of the propaganda that everywhere you encounter here in the West. I have to add, before I go directly to the topic I'm going to deliver, that the media are also responsible for most of miseducating people, misteaching people, giving them misinformation. This is a very bad thing. And here in America, sometimes when I listen to the media, really I am shocked, because their information and the news are so one-sided and unilateral, and I would say not impartial, that I fear that if this is the way that they cultivate the minds of the American people, again the future will be even darker. So it is incumbent on the students, and the people who pursue knowledge in a deep sense, that not to let themselves be victimized by the irresponsible propaganda of the media, and to go for themselves in order to find the truth about what happens on the ground in the Middle East, elsewhere, here in America and other places. So this is very important. It is also a responsibility and obligation of the intellectuals here in the West, as well as the intellectuals in the East, we shall come to that, to again to clarify people, not to just keep silent, and to deliver their knowledge to the people and to enlighten them about the truth of the matter on the earth. Well, on the surface, yes, you have got this crisis and this, infighting among Muslims, and the turbulent time, as I mentioned and described. This is very visible, but there is another invisible underground, if you like, movement in the Islamic world, which usually we do not notice because our media do not actually let us know about it. And that is a movement of religious reform in the Islamic land. It is now more than 100 years old. It is intellectual. It is scholarly. It is religious, and especially it is being done and performed by people who are not, involved in fighting, and they are not usually in the media. They are doing their own work, either in universities or in research institutes, or perhaps in isolation and individually. Most of them, if not all of them, are really isolated, banned, by their governments, because this is another calamity in the Middle East, that most of the countries are being ruled by the oppressor rulers, by the tyrants, by the despots. And under despotism, of course, you do not have the chance for freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And therefore, and especially if you want to say something unorthodox in the field of religion, you will be castigated, you will be banned, and sometimes you may lose your head. So there is an invisible movement, going on everywhere in the Islamic world, be it in Iran or in Arab land, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Egypt, in Tunisia, and some other places. And a host of scholars and religious reformers are working very hard, very diligently, and very sincerely, out of their faith, out of their belief, in order to reinterpret, in order to reread the religion, in order to reinterpret the symbols of religion. Every religion, this is one of the main fundamentalist presupposition, that the meanings of the sacred text are fixed. So they were fixed in the time of the Prophet. He meant this, and that is the eternal meaning of the word or of the text. No change. This is one of the main, suppositions of the fundamentalists. Whereas the religious reformers have got actually the opposite view, absolutely the opposite view. The view that the text has got a changing meaning. The meaning is in flux. It can be reinterpreted and reinterpreted all the time. There is no single interpretation for the text, for any text, including the sacred texts. Therefore, the historicity, or let us say the historicality of religion, is denied by fundamentalists, by the purists or Puritans, by the people who would like to go back to the original sources of religion. No, religion is like a seed which has been, cultivated by the Prophet at his time. But the seed now is a big grown tree. You cannot go back to the seed. It is neither possible nor desirable. You see, the seed was there in the time of the Prophet, but now in the soil of history, it's grown like a very big tree, not only a big tree, but a big garden. So we are now living in this garden, and we are not going back to the original seed, if at all. And so this is one of the wrong positions of the fundamentalists in religion. So there is a host, there is a movement of religious reform going on in the Sunni world, in the Shi'i world, less noticed, but has to be taken into consideration very seriously by scholars, by the people who study religion, to see that it is not only, these people, the fundamentalists, or let us say the terrorists, the so-called terrorists, they are not only products of religion or of Islam, or they are not only actors in the field of religion, but there are many others who are much silent, but nevertheless they are very working hard in order to offer a new interpretation. And this new interpretation, of course, has been done, not only in the case of Islam, but in Christianity you had it, and in all other religions. In Judaism, for example, you have it. In Christianity, a new interpretation actually came out when Luther, declared his 95 Theses. So Protestantism is a different interpretation of the same, canons, of the same Bible, the same text. So it is always possible that you have a new interpretation. And this is a vision which is followed by religious reformers. I tell you my story. I have been doing the same thing now about more than 20 years. I have written a lot about it, and I have spoken a lot about it, and I have seen that they are very, eager ears, to hear it and to understand that the traditional interpretation is not the final one. So you can have new ones, and but as the time passes, I see that the people show more interest in such reinterpretations. Now, after this brief introduction, let me come to the main topic. So it was, if you remember, freedom, reason, freedom, and democracy in Islam. Let me remind you of one thing, or perhaps eradicate a fallacy in the mind. There are many people who are speaking about Islam and democracy, to the extent that some people would think that it is an oxymoron, to speak of Islamic democracy or democratic Islam. I was in 2003 in Princeton University, and one of the topics that I taught there was political philosophy in Islam. I was speaking to a lady there, one of the professors, and she asked me, what is the topic, the subject you are teaching here? I said, political philosophy in Islam, and she said, okay, do you speak about Islamic democracy as well? I said, yes, we have some discussions about it in class. And then she said very bluntly that, oh, it looks an oxymoron to speak about Islamic democracy. These are two contradictory things. It is a contradiction in terms, and none of them actually can be compatible with the other. This is the common, notion about it. And let me just tell you in a bracket, oxymorons or contradictions are not very bad things in themselves. Sometimes oxymorons are gates to deeper truth, and therefore never be scared of oxymorons or contradictions. If you, open the enigma, so you may find a treasure under it. Now, I would like to tell you that it is not an oxymoron, because some people would think that democracy is going to be derived, from Islam. I tell you very positively and very clearly that none of these modern concepts can be derived, can be extracted from any religion whatsoever. Be it Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, none of these concepts you can find in the religion. So this is absolutely in vain. It is futile, to go for that. I know that some Muslim scholars have tried to do that, but that is absolutely impossible, and we have passed, if you like, the derivation period. There was a phase in Islamic thinking in the modern time that people try to perhaps derive, to extract such modern concepts from religious texts. But soon, it was clear that this is a very, vain effort. So one has to abandon it, and we have to abandon it. So when we talk about Islam and democracy, it doesn't mean that Islam as a religion contains a concept like democracy. No, it means, or perhaps we try to show that Muslims can have a democratic rule, can live a democratic life. This is the main, the gist of the matter. It doesn't mean that, as I said and I repeat, you can take it and draw it and derive it from the bulk of Islamic teaching. This is absolutely impossible. Modernity is not there. Modernity is not an illegitimate child. It is a legitimate child of the modern time, and all the concepts of modernity are really modern. So trying to make artificial links between them and the old ones, I think is a misconceived project. So let me go back to the topic and examine one by one the concepts we have got here. Now, reason in Islam, of course, there is no need to rationalize Islam because it is already reasonable. At least Islamic philosophy tells you a lot about the compatibility of philosophy as a rational science and Islam. There have been many people, even many jurists in Islam, many mystics who did not like philosophy, who thought that philosophy is a Greek product, is a secular product, is a pagan product. The Greeks, they were not religious people, they didn't have any prophet, no prophet had visited their land according to history. Some people have insisted or perhaps suggested that Socrates was a prophet, but I don't believe that, and I don't think that Socrates ever claimed that he was a prophet. But anyway, or even some people have said that maybe Plato was like a prophet. But anyway, philosophy is Greek by its very nature, and Islamic philosophy, of course, is Greek philosophy, somehow Islamized or made compatible with Islam. Some people, of course, within the Islamic tradition did not like it. But this does not mean that philosophy is anti-religious or anti-Islam, because many of the great philosophers come from Islamic culture and Islamic civilizations. So this shows that Islam is a fertile soil for cultivating philosophy, growing, philosophy, and producing, great philosophers. I come from Iran, and I would like to tell you that I am proud that most of the Muslim philosophers come from Iran, actually. And although Iranians are a minority among the whole Muslim nation, we are about 70 millions now among more than 1 billion, Muslims all over the world. But most of the Muslim philosophers come from Iran. Maybe now you search your mind, Ibn Sina maybe come to your mind, Sohrawardi comes to your mind, Tusi comes to your mind, and many others. All these come from Iran. To the extent that the number of the philosophers who were born in Iran and worked in Iran far outnumbers all other philosophers coming from the rest of the Islamic world. This is very important. And I'm not going into the deep root of that, but Iranians are very philosophically minded, and very poetically minded at the same time. And this shows at least that at least one of the branches of Islam, which is Shiism, is very compatible, very familiar, very interested in philosophy. Actually, Bertrand Russell, the British philosopher, he has got a very good book on the history of Western philosophy. There he says that philosophy has got a special link with Shiism. And I'm not sure if that is, a very plowed field. But anyway, most of the Islamic theologians, most of the Islamic philosophers come from Iran. But they were Muslims, nevertheless. Some of them were Shiites, some of them were Sunnites, and so on. this tells you that Islamic tradition, Islamic culture, Islamic civilization is, a very good context, a very good place, a very good soil, a fertile soil for philosophy, for rational sciences. Theology itself is a rational science. And, of course, experimental sciences, they are rational sciences because they have got to do with reason, with experiment. Some people, do make a mistake, but they make it, a distinction between experimental sciences and rational sciences. Rational sciences are rational because they use a priori concepts, whereas in experimental sciences you do not use a priori. Otherwise, both of them are rational. Experimentation is a rational business. So we had very good, mathematicians, we had very good physicians, chemists, geologists, and so on and so forth. We have got a very good scholar here in the history of mathematics in Islamic world. And again, I tell you, and this is not out of my nationalism here, that you can ask him, most of the Muslim mathematicians come from Iran as well. So it was a fertile land, and it is a fertile land. But the conclusion that I would like to come to is not a nationalistic thing, but that all these experimental and rational sciences, they made their way into the Islamic land, and they, faced no resistance whatsoever. And we had great philosophers, great scientists, great theologians, great thinkers, great poets, great mystics, and so on. So when you come to judge, to pass verdict on whether there is a compatibility between Islam and reason, of course there is a compatibility, and it means that Muslims have no reason whatsoever to reject science, to reject reason, to reject rationality. And that's why you see that so many Muslim students are all over in the Western world in order to educate themselves, in order to receive modern knowledge. And this is actually one of the main signs of the depth of the interest of Muslims in science. There is, I mentioned Iran, but I have to add another point. One of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad was an Iranian, whose name was Salman. And there is a saying coming to us from the Prophet that he said that if science is in heavens, the descendants of this gentleman, Salman, will go and catch it. So again, Iranians are proud of this saying of Prophet Muhammad. Now, we had two different and very important schools of theology in Islam, Ash'arites and Mu'tazilites. Those of you who have done some history of Islamic theology and Islamic culture certainly know about them. Mu'tazilites especially, who were subsequently, of course, unfortunately defeated and isolated, they had very important ideas, and I think that they were the first, theirs was the first secular movement inside the Islamic tradition, because they thought and they taught that morality is independent from religion. This was very important, and they thought and taught that good and bad are objective qualities. And in order to know what is good and bad, you need no religion. You only need your reason. That was, a very daring idea in 2nd century after the demise of the Prophet Muhammad, i.e. about 8th century AD. And so they were not, of course, very well received, but now the reform movement in Muslim societies and Muslim countries is somehow going back to Mu'tazilism, to revive their ideas. Very important, to revive their ideas, the independence of reason from religion, the independence of reason from revelation, the independence of morality from religion. Because nowadays you see that some of the religious people, in order to support their religious ideas, they say that without religion you cannot be an ethical person. Without religion you cannot have morality. This is absolutely wrong. Not only from the philosophical point of view, but also from a theological point of view. And Mu'tazilites were the first pioneers of the idea of the independence of religion from revelation. And they told people that even in order to be a religious person, you have to be a moral person beforehand. You have to be able to judge whether the religion is ethical or not, whether the religiosity is a moral obligation of man or not, and so on and so forth. So it comes first. But of course, we have the opposite view and the opposite school of theology, the Ash'arites, who actually argued, differently, and who thought that no, religion tells us what is good and what is bad, and if there were no religion at all, if there were no command of God as to what is good and what is bad, we were not able to discover for ourselves, and the whole humanity would have been in a chaos. That was another, the opposite view. And as I said, the religious reform movement in the Sunni countries, especially in Egypt and other places, the reform movement means going back to Mu'tazilism. Let us go back to Mu'tazilism. Because Mu'tazilism not only issued a fatwa as to the independence of reason and revelation, but also they were not literalists. They were not fundamentalists in the modern sense of the word. They did not think that there is a fixed meaning for the text. No. They were the people of interpretation. And because of that, actually, they gave new life, to the text. And they encouraged people to not to stay where they are and to change and, purify and revive their presupposition in order to come to new interpretations of the text. One of my colleagues who died unfortunately in 2010, Nasr Ahmed Abu Zaid from Egypt, he wrote a number of books, and he actually supported and advocated and propagated the idea of Mu'tazilites. And because of that, actually, he was virtually banned from teaching in Cairo University, from publishing his works, and he had to flee the country in order to get rid of their, evils. And even, a court in Egypt, in Cairo, made a decision and that he and his wife should be separated from each other. Because when you're an apostate, according to the classical Islamic law, your wife is no longer your wife. You are considered as dead. If you are an apostate, if you are declared an apostate, and Abu Zayd was declared an apostate, because he said so many unorthodox things about Quran, about the interpretation of Quran, and so on. And because of that, it was a huge, scandal, in Egypt. And mosques, actually, most of the imams in the mosques actually were delivering lectures and sermons against him everywhere in Cairo and other places. To the extent, as I said, he could not stay anymore in his own country, and he lived outside his homeland for 14 years. He was in Leiden, that I met him for the first time, and then, of course, frequently in many other places, in Columbia University and elsewhere. Yes, and his wife was divorced, by force from him. But of course, the decision of the lower court was revoked by the higher court, so it was okay. He died in 2010. 2010 was a tragic year for Islamic reform movement because another Muslim reformer, Muhammad Arkoun, he from Algeria, he also died at the same year. And another one from Morocco, Muhammad Jabri, who was, all these three were my friends actually, and we lost all of them. In Mesa, in 2010, I had a lecture about all these three. Their main, reform was to rationalize Islam in the sense to show that there is a rationality in not only in the teachings of Islam but also in the law of Islamic law. This is very important because most of the jurists most of the Muslim scholars in the past, in the pre-modern era, they used to think that Islamic law comes from God. It has a divine origin. Therefore, we cannot know what is the wisdom behind it, what is the reason behind it. When they say that, for example, let us say, take one of the most difficult cases, an apostate should be executed. All right, let us take this as one of the, real cases and one of the main Islamic laws, an authentic one. It is not in the Quran, to be sure, and I assure you that there is no such thing in the Quran, but of course it has been practiced by Muslims. And the last one was, as I said, Mr. Nasr Abu Zaid, who fortunately escaped. So he was declared an apostate, and automatically he had to be, beheaded or executed. Now, most of the Muslim jurists would argue that we don't know why, but we have to do it. We have to apply it. You are an apostate, then you have to be, you lose your life. That's it. What is the reason behind it? What is the rationale behind this law and many other laws? We do not know. We cannot know. We should not know. God has not made it known to us. And there are hidden, invisible wisdom behind this law, and there are many other things, of course, like this. But in the reform movement, and this is the most important thing, and this is the reconciliation of reason with religion here, they say no, there is a wisdom behind it. There is a wisdom, and that wisdom can be uncovered by our reason. And we have to uncover it and discover it in order to see why there has been, in the first place, such a law, such a regulation, and if at all there has been such a thing, are they applicable nowadays or not? Do we have to apply it? Is it our obligations, religious duty nowadays to do it? Or perhaps we have to abandon it, we have to stop it, we have to abrogate it, and so on. So this is a very important point. So one of the bad things about the Islamic Sharia in the past was its seeming irrationality. Of course, it didn't mean that there was no rationale in it, but they argued that we cannot, discover it, and we cannot, uncover it. So let us be there. Let us apply it. Let's practice it. But this is not the case anymore in our time. So this is one of the new cases of reconciling reason with Islamic teachings. It's very important, and that's. You see that, for example, in the case of veiling, okay, let us say that it has been one of the laws of Islam that Muslim women should veil themselves, should cover their hair and their body, and so on. But there must be a rationale behind it. We cannot say that this is a divine command and we have to obey it. That's it, failure. No, that was the case with the Muslim jurists in the past. But nowadays, Muslim reformers, they are all going after finding out the rationale and the wisdom behind it. And once you find the wisdom, and once you are sure about it, then you would be able to say whether a Muslim woman should practice it nowadays or should stop it. Very important. So it is a kind of demystification of Islamic law. It is a kind of secularization of Islamic law. Secularization in the sense of rationalization, of demystification. Because all religions, including Islam, they are very prone to mystification. Very prone. Everything is mystified. This is there because God has said. We have to do it. We have to apply it. We do not only reason. In the hereafter, you will see the outcome of what you do here, and so on and so forth. But once you start demystifying, without denying, without disobeying, but just demystifying the rules and the laws, then you will have a reformed religion. A reformed religion in terms that now you have got a religion, according to Kant, within the framework of reason. So So I hope I am clear now in this point that there is a link and there is an interest of reason in religion and interest of religion in reason, and there is a compatibility between the two, and the process of demystification of religious rule and Sharia has begun, and it is what is called originally the religious reform in Islam, and it is an ongoing movement which is sometimes invisible, but you have to know that under the surface, beneath the surface, and under these bloodsheds, which everybody thinks that this is the final product of Islamic religion, there is such a reform, and fortunately it is a very strong one, and the products will come to the market very soon, of course, for the people who would like the prospective buyers, and will find it very soon. Coming to freedom and democracy. Now, freedom, of course, is a very important subject, a very lofty, opulent concept. Let me just divide it into two types of freedom, political freedom and economical freedom. So at least we have got these two, and economical freedom means, in the modern terminology, market economy or capitalism or whatever. And of course, political freedom means democracy. Economical freedom, I think, is there in Islam. I mean, no doubt about it. Some people have even blamed Islam for economic freedom. They thought and they taught that perhaps Islam is a capitalist religion, and it does not put, a ceiling, let us say, on your income, on your wealth. Thank you. You can earn whatever you like, provided you pay your religious tax, you see. So it is virtually a market economy, a free economy. Of course, I mean, capitalism is a product of the modern time. In the past, you had feudalism, you had bourgeoisie, and whatever. But anyway, there were no barrier whatsoever for earning money, for becoming a wealthy man, for having, amassed wealth and money and so on. So economic freedom is there. And there were, some socialist-minded Muslims, especially at the advent of socialism and communism in Russia, that propagated and supported the idea of Islamic socialism. They wrote books about it. I was talking to some of the students here who have done some Arabic or come from some Arabic background, and I read to them, at dinner, some of the poems, but one of the most famous Egyptian poet, who says that the Prophet Muhammad was the leader of the socialists. This is exactly what he says. Al-ishtirakiyuna anta imamuhum, lawla da'aw al-qawm wal-ghalbaw. This is exactly the poetry that he made it some 80 years ago, 90 years ago. You see what he says? Because at that time, socialism was in vogue, and everybody thought that economic justice comes through socialism, and capitalism is injustice. That was still, you have got the same thing, but the failure of socialism and communism in Russia now has made, Marxism and socialism more or less a defeated school of thought and economics. But it was not like this before. And especially 50 years ago, 60, when I was young, socialism was everywhere. And everybody thought that capitalism is mere injustice and socialism is an embodiment of justice. Period. So some socialist-minded Muslim scholars actually at that time, argued that Islam is, is socialism, or at least we can have an Islamic socialism. I know some jurists, some grand Ayatollahs, who wrote books to reconcile Islam and socialism, to say that capitalism is not in the nature of Islamic teaching. But I think nowadays, virtually this idea has been abandoned. And most of the jurists, in Iran, elsewhere in the Islamic land, they think that free economic, if not capitalism, in the well-blown sense of it here in America, that free market economy is something which has been always with Muslims, and no jurist has said anything against it. You cannot find anything in the Quran or in the sayings of the Prophet to say that free market is forbidden, is haram, is banned, is bad, and so on. No, it is not like that. So as far as the freedom in economics is concerned, I think you can be fairly assured that you have it. But what about political freedom? Political freedom is again another issue which has to be addressed, important. This is one of the things that Muslim reformers have taken it very seriously. And I would like to take you to the root of the matter, if I am allowed and if I am not trespassing my limits, Look, the language of all, this is important especially for those of you who study religious philosophy. The language of all religions is the language of obligations, is not the language of rights. The language of rights is a modern language, is a modern paradigm, actually. It is a modern paradigm. In the pre-modern era, the language of ethics, the language of all religions were the language of obligations. This is your duty, that is your obligations. Whereas the rights are very marginal, very marginalized. I'm not saying that rights are not mentioned. Yes, they are there. But they are to be derived from your obligations. This is absolutely reverse in the modern time. We are living in the paradigm of rights, not the paradigm of obligation. This is very bad, actually. Bad in the sense that this is incomplete. I tell you my experience, an experiment. When I deliver public lectures here in America and in the West, I put my main emphasis on duties, obligations, and responsibilities. Because I know that already the mind of my audience are imbued with the idea of rights. And right means to claim. Claiming this, claiming that. Claim rights, You are full of a bunch of claims, I need that, I claim that, you have to do this for me, the government is responsible to do this and that. We are the children of the Declaration of Human Rights, in 1948. This was not done, this was not signed before that. The idea was in the air, but it was, registered in 1948, and now it is a canon for everywhere and every country in the world. You are the children of this age. But if you were the children of 200 years before, 400 years ago, then your minds and brains would have been absolutely different. You did not ask and would not ask, what are my rights? You would ask, what are my obligations? What are my responsibilities? Now, when I deliver a public speech in my country, in some Islamic countries, I put my main emphasis on rights. I tell them that you have to claim your rights because you are living under an oppressive regime. But when I deliver a public speech here in the West, in America, I mainly make my emphasis on responsibilities. Do not forget your responsibilities. Of course you have got rights. You have got every right to claim your rights, no doubt about it. But what about obligations? What about duties and responsibilities? Tell you an anecdote. Several years ago, I was invited to Austria for a conference. What was the conference? They wanted to draft a declaration of human responsibilities. You see? And they had, exactly the same problem, the same thing, that everywhere people are speaking about their rights. Then where are responsibilities? Who is responsible for what? Everybody is claiming his rights. And they drafted actually a declaration of human responsibilities. You know what? The head of the conference, actually the workshop was going on for several years until they came eventually to a draft of human responsibilities. They sent it, according to the head of the conference, they sent it to the all heads of the state. Not all of them, many of them. And you know what was the reaction and what was the response? The response was this, that we are not going to apply it, we are not going to deliver it, because it eventually will support dictatorship. Okay, this is very important, and this is a very important food for your thought, to think about it, that in the interest of democracy and justice, responsibilities are virtually forgotten, virtually marginalized and isolated. And to the extent that if I ask you, what are your rights, I think you can give me a number of them, right away. But if I ask you what are responsibilities, you have to think about it. This means that we are not ready to face our obligations. Now I tell you, if you want to know what is one of the main differences between the modern era we are living in and the pre-modern era is this, that the pre-modern era was the era of obligations and responsibilities. The modern era is the era of rights and claims. We are more familiar with our claim rights than with our responsibilities. Religions, all religions, actually belong to the era of responsibilities and obligations. And the language of all religions is the language of obligations. Go to the Bible, go to the Gospel, go to the Quran, and try to find, a verse which tells you what are your rights. Virtually you cannot find any. Under a very, twisted interpretation, you might find one. So this is why democracy cannot be derived, cannot be found in any religious text, because democracy is a politics based on human rights, not on human obligations. The language of all democracy is the language of rights. It's not the language of obligations. Again, I am not saying that there are no responsibilities, no obligations. But what comes first? What is the main course, actually, is rights. And then, of course, you have some small dishes, around. It's called your obligations. You may or may not, consume them. But as to the main course, yes, of course, that is the main course. I mean, you cannot forget it, and you cannot leave it behind. Okay, so no religion actually is familiar with democratic freedom or democracy as such. This is because of the language of the religion. But this is incomplete. One has to add another thing in order to make the whole picture complete. But all religions actually talk about justice. Never forget that justice is both our rights and our duty. So justice is there, divine justice, human justice, distributive justice, freedom, economic justice, political justice, all this you have got in all religions. Sometimes in legal terms and sometimes in ethical terms, but you have it. Because justice is the mother concept of ethics and politics. It's the mother concept of two main branches of human practice and human knowledge. Politics on the one hand, political justice and ethical justice. So no religion can be void of the idea of justice. And democracy actually is a modern way to apply and to implement justice. So it is a method. Justice cannot be reduced to democracy, but democracy can be reduced to justice, you see? Because justice is something which is everywhere. It is, let us say, meta-temporal. meta-historical. It is in a concept which in all history you have it and you have to have it. But the methods to apply it, to implement it, is different. So democracy is a way that the modern man has found in order to apply justice and in order to not to violate the rights of people. Especially democracy is a way to apply justice for the people who are rights-oriented, not obligation-oriented. The people who are rights-oriented in the modern era, democracy is the best politic for them in order to have justice. So when you speak about the relationship between Islam and democracy, yes, democracy cannot be derived from Islam nor from any other religion for that matter. But what about the justice? Yes, there is a very close link and friendship, if you like, between religion, all religion, including Islam, and justice. Now, it is the task of Muslim scholars, of Muslim reformers, of Muslim interpreters to find a way to apply justice to Muslim countries. Maybe democracy, which is a make of Westerners, is the best way, or maybe they find another way, because democracy is not a God-given thing, it is a man-made thing, and you have to think where you can apply it best, you see. And but one of the things that I have to confess is that the idea of rights is not as important in Muslim countries and Muslim tradition as it is now here in the West. This is a shortcoming, this is a deficiency which has to remedy, which has to be made up. And we need, to, as I said, to support it, to export it, if you like, to Muslim countries, to Muslim tradition. Because one of the pillars of democracy is rule of law. And Muslims are very law-minded people, because we have got fiqh and Sharia is law. From the very beginning of your mature life, when you are a mature person, say if you are a boy from the age 16, 15, you always ask yourself, what is my duties and what are things that I have to do? Because no Muslim is left alone in terms of eating, for drinking, for clothing, for washing, for trading. Everything you have got a law in Islamic Sharia. Therefore, a Muslim is very low-minded, and this is one of the main basic pillars of all democracy. The deficiency is that the rights are not there still, well established. The low-mindedness go together with the duty-mindedness. So you need some rights to inject into the Islamic Sharia in order to make it perhaps more modern, more reformed, and more democratic. So I think this brings me to the end of my talk. There is a deep challenge, anyway, in the Islamic world, political as well as intellectual. The political challenges are very on the surface, and they are visible everywhere. But that should not be your point of reference in order to judge, in order to study, in order to know Islamic culture, which is 1400 years old. But then you have got intellectual challenges, which are very severely and seriously being pursued among the Muslim scholars and Muslim reformers all over Islamic land in the modern time. And they are trying to reinterpret Islam and to reform it and to reshape it and to re-understand it and to re-offer it to the world, and to show that there are capabilities in this religion in order to give meaning to the life of more than 1 billion people. Because in the modern time, more than being a source of law, more than being a source of identity, all religions should be sources of meaning of life. If they do not give you a meaning for your life, then they are not worth it. I mean, to practice what? You have got, a secular law, you have got, modern science, and you can manage your life. But what is wanting? What is missing? And you cannot find it, neither in philosophy nor in science, is the meaning of life. That comes from religion. And if religions are corrupt, that means that they are no longer able to do their function, to do their job. This is the obligation of religious reformers, to bring religion to life, to make it compatible with the modern way of life, to eradicate the corruptions which has been added and infiltrated into the religion, and to make it powerful enough in order to be a source of the meaning, for the meaning of life. Thank you very much.
We now have some time for questions, so I guess I will let Dr. Soroush call on people, but if you need to leave, go ahead now. And once again, if anybody from Professor Struebel's classes need to sign in as being here, come find me and I will send you an excuse.
Where do you want me to? Well, where?
Anybody have a question first?
Yes, I would be very glad and happy to receive your observation, not only question, observations and comments or whatever. Yes, please. Go ahead. Yeah, I think she's the first.
So I just want to say I really appreciate the attempt to reinterpret Islam in a modernized light, and I think this is vital, and we definitely need to stand behind people who are doing so and protect them. But I'm an ex-Shia Muslim, an atheist now, and I want to talk about the penalty for apostasy in Islam. Although there is some ambiguity regarding the penalty of apostasy in the Quran, the Hadith unquestionably ascribes the death penalty. And even during Muhammad's time, though this policy was implemented, do you think this is compatible with a reasonable, free, and democratic form of Islam? And do you believe that Hadith can still be disregarded, even though Sharia is a combination of Quran and Hadith? And can we realistically expect the majority of Muslims to disregard it in this way?
Yes, as I said, the law about apostasy is not in the Quran, and you said that it was implemented in the time of the Prophet. It is not proved. I don't think that it was implemented in the time of the Prophet. There is no evidence for that. Actually, what you find in the Quran is this, that if somebody changes his religion, then he's in the hand of God. So he knows what to do with him or her. That is as far as you find as much as you find in the Quran. And there is also another verse in the Quran that there are people who come in the morning to the Prophet or to other Muslims and declare that they are Muslims. And then in the evening they say they are no longer any Muslims. So they change their belief, all the time. And in order to ridicule, the religion of the religious people, these people are blamed, and that is it, what you have it in the Quran. I remember that this reminds me of Buddha, who reportedly had said that if somebody changes his religion 6 times, so let him never come to me back again. Of course, no death penalty, but This is no good anymore. I mean, you change your religion all the time and you are undecided person. So this much is what is going on in the Quran. But yes, in the hadith, reportedly, there is a hadith which is said that the Prophet said that if somebody changes his religion, kill him, you know. And it has been practiced by Muslims. You know, you are right. It has been in practice for some time. Sorry?
It's still practiced today in most Muslim
Yes, it was practiced. Now, let me tell you something. It was not only in Islam, but also you had it in Judaism and you had it in Christianity, you know. And in Christianity also it was a very bad and tragic thing, you know. Catholics, you know, killed and executed Protestants more than any other religion, you know, beheaded them, you know. And there are now pictures of the time that they were Bartholomew, for example, massacre and so on. Now again, you know, I am a historian of science, or at least I have done history of science. First lesson in the history of science that they taught us was this: never think that the people in the past, they were irrational people. Never think that they were mad. Never think that they took crazy decisions. Never think that you are the first rational person who has ever been created by God. And people in the past all were hazy, crazy, and so on. No, that is not the case. So let us, this is very important. So if there were such a rule and regulation, or at least it has been there, because many Muslims have practiced it, what was the reason or wisdom behind it? What was the rationale behind it? We should not, you know, think that it was a crazy decision. And I tell you now, what was we may not like the reason, but there was a reason, you see, so it was reasonable. The reason behind it, and both in Christianity, you have it in Thomas Aquinas as well, but of course his is a little bit more twisted. But in the case of Islam is this, that we live in an era that life is more important than belief. And in the past, it was absolutely reverse. Belief was more important than life. You see? And this is exactly the reason and rationale behind, you know, taking the life of somebody who has lost his true belief. Okay? So it was not irrational in the sense that some people just emotionally and out of their craziness, they wanted to kill somebody. They thought that, like Aristotle, that we are rational beings, and if we have got crazy ideas, we are no longer human, you know, beings. We are like animals. This was their calculation and their argumentation. If we have got crazy ideas, if we are not, you know, right persons, that we are no persons anymore. For example, forget about religion. Do you think that, for example, Hitler was a human being? Really? You know, because we are human beings because of our ideas. And if our ideas are not really the right ideas, so we lose our humanity anyway. Nowadays, actually, people think that life is more important than belief. You know, whatever your beliefs, you have got every right to live. That's true. But at the same time, nowadays, we think that our life is not superior to our land. If our land is in danger, we have to sacrifice our life. So do not think that life is over and above everything, superior to everything. You know, always in the history you have got something that you think that it is more important than your life, and you have to sacrifice your life. Nowadays it is for soil, for turf. In the past it was for God, for belief, for religion. I am just telling you about the rationale behind it, that it was not out of craziness. There was an argument, there was a calculation behind it. Now, of course, the psychology of human beings has changed. Nobody actually can understand or can even, submit to the idea that life is less important than belief. And if you change your belief, you have to lose your life. So the rule and the regulation is the life of the regulation is over. And because we are living in a different world. So if there has been such a law at all in the past, nowadays, this is not what I'm saying now, even some grand ayatollahs, I discussed this with one of the grand ayatollahs in Iran. We had a correspondence, and actually he changed his view, and he declared it publicly that the change of belief or religion is no longer make you, liable for losing your life. So if you challenge the view, behind the regulation, and if you tell them that, okay, suppose that there has been such a supposition behind it. The supposition nowadays has no buyer, and people psychologically have changed, and the values are, different. Life is more important than belief. Then, of course, they will come to the conclusion that because there is a rule and there is a principle in Islamic law, which is called ijtihad. You are familiar with it. Ijtihad means to revise and to reform the regulations. And this revising and reforming the regulation has got its own logic, of course. And one of the logic behind it is to change your presupposition. And when you change your presupposition, logically, of course, the consequences will change. Sorry, no, I mean the gentleman is, yeah.
Go ahead.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would you explain in brief the difference between Shia and Sunni, and can the differences be reconcilable?
Oh. Well, I cannot really, in brief, I cannot do that. And, the only thing that I can say is this, that the main issue was the successorship of the Prophet Muhammad. The main difference between Sunnis and Shiites is this, that the Shiites claim that the Prophet actually appointed his successor, and he named him, and he actually introduced him to people, and everybody knew who were to be the successor after the Prophet Muhammad. But the Sunnites say no, there was no such thing, and the Prophet did not name, did not appoint anybody, and it was left to the people after the Prophet Muhammad to sit and to consult and to deliberate and to appoint the successor of the Prophet Muhammad. And actually they did it. It was what happened in history. The person whom Shiites claimed that was supposed to be the appointed successor of the Prophet, he never became the successor of the Prophet, And what originally and historically happened was that a number of, Muslims, deliberated and then they appointed a particular person called Abu Bakr as the first Caliph, okay? So sometimes they say that it was a democratic way of doing things, of appointing the successor. So that was, the main clivage, the main, divide between Muslims on the issue of the successorship of the Prophet Muhammad. And it's still with us, The Shiites say, okay, we obey the real successor of the Prophet, who never became the successor. And the Sunnites say, no, the real successors were the historical successors, and so on. But of course, from there you have a number of different things, For example, the Islamic law in Sunnism is a little bit different from in Shiites, because in Sunnism, in the Sunni world, the Islamic law comes from the successors of the Prophet and the self-styled jurists. Whereas in the Shiite case, the descendants of the Prophet were the main legislators. So they follow the fiqh or the Sharia coming to them from the descendants, Ahl al-Bayt, the family, the members of the family of Prophet. So, and in the case of the Shia, they think that like Christians, they have got a living imam, and he's there, and he will appear, whenever he thinks is the right time to appear. But in the Sunni case, they think that somebody will come at the end of time, but he's not living now. He will be born at the end of time, and then he will appear, not reappear, and then make the world full of justice and so on. And both of them actually claim that Christ, Jesus Christ, will descend, will come down from heavens in order to be in the service of the living Imam at the end of time. So here actually there is a combination of Christianity and of Islam in the case of the last Savior, who come, and the hereafter and the next life, of course, will come after the reappearance of the hidden Imam at a time who never, God knows where. And of course, the idea of martyrdom is very strong in Shiism, because the third Imam of the Shiis, he was martyred. And the idea of jihad also is very strong in Shiism. Shiites have been always a minority in the Muslim world, in the Muslim history. Nowadays, Shiites are about 10% of the whole population of Islamic world. 90% of the Muslims are Sunnites. And even in the past, the Shiite population has been much less than this. Okay, so we as Shiites, I come from Iran, where Shiism is the dominant religion, have been always a minority. And I'm not sure if you have lived anywhere as a minority or not. The minorities have got a special psychology. When you are a minority and you are isolated and you are marginalized, the sense of identity becomes very strong in you. You would like to assert yourself in whatever way you can. You see, self-assertion is one of the main psychological elements of the minorities. And look at the behavior of some of these people, like this Khilafah Islamiyya and the so-called fundamentalists. One of the reasons of their behavior is their feeling of being a minority in the world. They would like to assert themselves. They would like to say that they are somebody, but by, drawing sword, by beheading people. This is a way of asserting oneself. When you are minoritized, and when you are in a crisis of identity, when you are marginalized, somehow you would try to assert yourself. So Shiites have been always a minority. And that's why, after all, in the long history of Islamic tradition, a revolution took place only in a Shiite country, not in any Sunnite country. It is very important. First of all, because of the minority feeling. Secondly, because the idea of martyrdom is very strong among Shiites. And they think that this is one of the principal teachings of their imams, that they have to be ready to offer their lives and for their ideals and values and so on. I saw some of the Sunni scholars that they were blaming themselves. It was right after the Iranian revolution. Some of Egyptians and Jordanians and so on, they really blamed themselves for being so nice, because they said, you are very prone to martyrdom. You would like to offer your blood and your life for your cause, but we Sunnites, we are more conservative, and so on. So these are the differences. But as far as the philosophy is concerned, as far as theology, as far as especially ethics and morality, much the same. Much the same. They have got one God, they have got one book, they have got one Qibla, one Mecca, they pray 5 times a day, they fast in Ramadan, and most of these things are virtually the same. It is the responsibility of the religious leaders actually to convince their followers that there are not much differences among us. But then the religious leaders themselves, they are extreme. Then they, persuade their followers in order to make fights. But I tell you, there have never been in the history of Islamic tradition an infighting like what you had it among the Catholics and Protestants. There have never been such a thing in the whole history of Islam. Fortunately, we did not have Inquisition. We are proud of it. I have said this in many places actually, and you have to know it about the history of Islam. The Inquisition has no precedence whatsoever in Islam. Although we have the law of apostasy, but no Inquisition. It was not the case that there was an institute in order to follow people to see who is an apostate, who said what, who did what, in order to capture them, to persecute them and to execute them. There has been no things like that. And this means that there have been some sort of moderation, anyway. But nowadays, actually, and unfortunately, we have got such an extremism, but they are a tiny, tiny, tiny minority among Muslims, rejected by all Muslim scholars. And so one should not be misled, by observing such ugly phenomenon. No, I think the gentleman, yeah.
You say that religion is what gives us meaning, but it also defines our obligations, and can't that be dangerous at times? I mean, we have young men in the Middle East beheading people because they feel it's their religious obligation. Here in the States, they can run from sexism to whatever in a Christian religion. The televangelists say that it's your obligation to buy me a Rolex and so on. I mean, can't religion and their leaders defining what your obligation be, can't that be a problem? Or isn't it a problem?
Yes, of course, religions are source of obligations and rights, but mind you, we cannot, abandon obligations. Obligations like rights, they can be misused. So it is important that we have to be very careful about misusing concepts, misusing justice, misusing freedom, misusing obligation, misusing rights, and so on. Let me tell you one thing, and this is from Rumi, since Muhammad mentioned here that I have been, I'm supposed to be an expert on Rumi. Rumi has got a very good, analogy about religion, which I'd like to share it with you. He says religion, including Islam, but he uses the word Quran actually here. He says religion is like a rope, a cord, you can take it and use it in order to go down to the bottom of the well, or you can use it in order to come out of the well. It is your choice. So religion in itself can be used and can be misused. There is a proverb in Persian. We say that you can use a rope in order to stifle yourself. So it is a rope, but you can have many other uses. Religion is like any other thing. We human beings actually give direction to other religion. You may, direct your religion towards stifling freedoms, towards, annihilating people and so on, obliterating culture. And on the other hand, you can use it in a more positive way. So yes, it is the case that there are people who think that it is their religious duty to kill other people or to force them to become Muslims and so on. But there are many other who outnumber them, who think that this is not their religious duty, and their religious duty actually is to stop them from doing that. So let us be careful about misusing. You can misuse science, you can misuse technology, you can misuse every nice concept of human civilization. That has to be stopped by civilized people. That has to be stopped by responsible people. Yes?
I have a question from me and then from Professor Strubel, who couldn't attend. Mine is, how do you interpret the Quranic verse which a lot of political Muslims or Islamists use, that the Quran asks Muslims to obey those who hold authority, ulul amri minkum. In Egypt, often people interpret that as we obey the dictator. In the United States, we obey the democratically elected president. In Iran, vilayat faqih, the rule of the jurists, is that concept. We obey the ulama, the religious scholars. Do you interpret that verse to suggest that ulul amri minkum is the holders of authority are the people that, in your understanding of democracy? And then the question from Professor Strubel is, Professor Strubel tends to be very conservative about the use of the word, or reluctant to use the word reformation, because people like Maulana Maududi and Sayyid Qutb considered themselves reformers in the sense that they wanted to marginalize liberal tendencies in Islam, such as Sufism, from the tradition and go back to the original precepts as they saw it. And so in a sense that Reformation limits certain freedoms. Do you get the gist of what I'm not explaining his question very well, but there are issues, and also Reformation has this connotation with Christianity and Protestantism, and that's marked by violence. And do Muslims really want this period of violence that existed within Christianity in the past?
Well, as to the first question you made, the ulul amr and the authority that Muslims should obey. Look, I have to remind you of another main thing here. All religions, again, including Islam, belong to the pre-nation state era of history, And that's why we have got Khilafah Islamiyah, we have got Islamic Khilafah, we have got the term ulul amr as the authority of all Muslims and so on. Because this is very important, and I see that most of Muslim thinkers and reformers are really negligent of this, or perhaps ignorant of it. They do not see it. We are not a single Islamic ummah anymore. You have got more than 40, Muslim countries, Muslim majority countries, isn't it? And each one of them has got their own national interest. This is very important. The idea and the concept of national interest did not exist in the past. The whole Muslim ummah, the Muslim community as a whole, had a single, national interest. But you have got now conflicting national interests, And so there are different Muslim countries with conflicting national interests. So there cannot be a Muslim Khilafah anymore. Ulul amr. Therefore, we have to again see the context, the historical context of what you have it in the Quran. Without that, you cannot reach the original meaning. You cannot, interpret it or reinterpret it. So, I mean, in Iran, we have. This is a mistake. This is a misleading, actually term that in Iran they use the word wali al-amr. They say that the Iranian leader is the leader of all Muslims. This is a contradiction in term. This is a misnomer. This is a historical, thing. Because the leader of all Muslims is meaningful when you have got an Islamic ummah. But when you do not have an Islamic ummah and you have got 40 different Muslim countries, you cannot have a single leader, a single Khalifa, and this is, ridiculous. So I would say that in order to reach the correct interpretation of the verses of the Quran, we have to take into consideration the context. And not only the era, the pre-modern era, was the era of obligations, but also it was the era of pre-nation state. It was, at the time, people were not citizens, they were subjects. You know, the British subjects means the people who were subject to the king of Britain, but nowadays they are citizens. They are no longer British subjects. And Egyptian subjects and so on. So the word subject, which means subjugated, you know, this no longer is the case. You cannot use the term because now you are living in a time of citizenship, citizenry, okay? So again, the Quran and none of the other sacred texts have got the idea of citizenry. This is absolutely absent, you know. The idea of right is absolutely absent. The idea of nature is absolutely absent. And Leo Strauss, you know, the philosopher, the American German philosopher, he has got a very good book about the natural lights and history. He says that the word nature does not appear in any sacred text. So we have to be very careful when we read these texts, when we use them, we interpret them, and contextualization is a main responsibility of any interpreter. So when I read the Quran, I know that what is the language, you know. I know what is the historical context of it. And this historicalization or contextualization is not a vague, hazy concept. I know that I am living in a modern state era. Most of the rules and regulations of Islam belong to the pre-modern Islam. Can be practiced only in Islamic ummah, not in Islamic nation. We are nations, you know, now. But in the past there was only one Islamic nation. But now we are nations. And every one of us have got his own or her own leader and so on and so forth. So be careful about this, and then you will find a way how to interpret or reinterpret. And coming to the second question, and maybe what you assigned or attributed to Professor Schubel. Well, there are people who are not happy, I know, about this business of reforming religion. But I tell you, I have got a book, not yet, translated into English, but not yet published. And the main title is this, Expansion and Construction of Religious Knowledge. You know, and I argue in the book, which is 600 pages, I cannot, you know, reduce it to 5 minutes. I argue in the book that religion is always in the process of reform. You may or may not, you know, notice it. You may or may not intend it, but it just takes place unintentionally, inadvertently. You know, this is very important. Because, you know, I argue in the book that different branches of knowledge are in permanent give and take. You know, when your philosophy becomes different, changes, your understanding of the word, your understanding of the text, and everything changes. You know, different sciences speak to each other. You cannot have an advanced physics without an advanced mathematics. You cannot have an advanced economics without an advanced mathematics. You see what I mean? You cannot have an advanced theology or philosophy of religion without having an advanced philosophy in the first place, you know. So these things always, you know, come together and speak to each other and, you know, change accordingly. So our understanding of religion, of any text, is subject to the same rule, to the same principle. So religion or religious understanding is constant reform. Reform means reinterpretation. Well, of course, and the connotation of the Protestantism should not, you know, mislead us. We know what was the gist of the matter in the case of Protestantism. You know, that cannot take place in the case of Islam, because in Islam, first of all, you do not have a single authority like Pope, and you do not have church, you know, and the church is not an intermediary between you and God. This was the main idea in Protestantism, that everybody is his own priest. In Islam, everybody is his own priest. You need no cleric whatsoever. in order to reach God, in order to pray to God, and in order to speak to God. No, you are your own priest. In the sense, some people have argued, like Ernst Gellner, the anthropologist of the Oxford University. He says Islam cannot be secularized because it is already secular. And he's right. Secular in the sense that no cleric is needed. If you are a Christian and if you want to have a religious marriage, you have to go to the church, first of all. And this is important, this is vital, a cleric should say that I declare you man and wife. Isn't it the case? Otherwise, your marriage is it's not religious. You can go to the principality, whatever. I, as a priest, he is a part of the business. This is a religious marriage. But in Islam, you do not have this. You need no clerics. You need not go to mosque. You need not go to any priest. You, as a man, with your partner, as a girl, as a woman, come together, and both of you say, okay, we would like to become man and wife, and then you are man and wife. That's it. As simple as that. And in the case of divorce, it's the same. There is no single practice in Islam that it needs the presence of a cleric. No single one. Whatever is your duty, you can perform it yourself. You see, you can perform, be it your prayer, be it your divorce, your marriage, your selling, your buying, your trading, your whatever you are going to Hajj, to Mecca. You need no cleric. Of course, sometimes you need them in order to ask them what to do and what not to do. But then it is up to you to do it. And their presence is not needed at all. This is the secular nature. So we do not actually, what Luther did was to some extent to secularize religion, secularize Christianity, in the sense that he said that everybody is his own priest. He decides how to interpret the text. He decides where and how to pray to God, and there is nobody between him and God, and so on and so forth. This is the gist of Protestantism. We do not need such a reformation because in Islam this is already there. You need not it. Reformation means reinterpretations. This I repeated several times. Reformation does not mean to remove the church. We do not have any church. To remove the authority of the church. We do not have any authority, neither in Sunni nor in Shi'is. Nowadays I see some people ask me, who is the authority in Islam? There is no single authority. In Shi'ism there are so many Ayatollahs, and in Sunni, even if you don't have any Ayatollah, some people go to Al-Azhar University in Cairo, and they think that what they say is Islam itself. No, it's not the case. They have got many people who are who disagree with them, who do not like their ideas, and so on. Protestantism actually was Sufism as Islam was like Protestantism from the beginning. They said that everybody is his own, and everybody can have his own interpretation of the text, and they have got orders, among them, and they have got leaders, and so forth. But reform in Islam means reinterpretation, and I tell you, and this is my ardent belief, that there is no pure Islam. There does not exist. This is a myth. A pure Islam or a pure Christianity, a pure Judaism, a pure Marxism does not exist. As I mentioned, I am quite ready to argue for it, and I will argue for that in 600 pages in my book, that a pure Islam cannot exist, and even if it does exist, it is neither possible nor desirable to find it, to uncover it, and to capture it, and to use it. Because as I said, the pure Islam, the seed was in the time of the Prophet. But the seed now has become a large garden, with many different trees and many different fruits. You cannot ignore it, and you cannot go back. Or maybe I give you another analogy or another example. It's like a fetus. The fetus, you might say that, okay, a grown-up man, for example, a 50 years old man, a very knowledgeable person. No. I don't want you, I want the purity of you, the pure. So you have to go back to the fetus, to the, in order to find him, because so many things has been added to him, knowledge, weight, and things. No, I don't like you and don't bite you. I want the pure. So who is the pure? The fetus in the womb of the mother. So it is neither possible nor desirable. So you have to, and this is not the case true in the case of Islam, but also in Christianity. Christianity now is a big garden. So many philosophers, mystics, thinkers, and so on, saints, have appeared in the history of Christianity. And here comes my dictum. Islam is nothing but a series of interpretations of Islam. And for that matter, Christianity is nothing but a series of interpretations of Christianity. And if you think that you can give a new interpretation to eradicate all the previous interpretations, you cannot do that. What you do is only to add another interpretation to the previous ones. If so far you had 70 interpretations, then it will become 71. Never think that the whole 70 interpretation will go away and your own interpretation will sit on the chair. That is not the case. And this has been the wish and the whim of many reformers, so-called reformers, of course, that they thought that they will come up with pure Islam, with the right interpretation of Islam, of the Quran, and then the whole earth will be heavens. But what we see is this, that we have got so many interpretations, and none of them has been able to make others, fall away. So let us be, careful about the historical life of religions. Religions, like many other human-made things, are historical, and historicality and historicity is the very nature of them. It's the very nature of them. Going back to the original sources is like going back to the fetus in the womb of the mother, which is neither possible nor desirable. And in that sense, I am for reformation. I am for reinterpretation of the religious tradition. And this reinterpretation actually has got two sides. On the one side, you add a new interpretation. On the other side, you eradicate and remove some of the old interpretations and some of the old prejudices and some of the old corruptions and so on and so forth. So it is at the same time a two-edged, sword. With one them you give life, and with the other them you give death to the things which have to die away. Okay, if you like, this brings us to the end of this. I am already a little bit too tired, to take your. Thank you for. Really, it was a nice, a very unique opportunity for me to be here. Thank you for coming, for your patience. I know that patience is a virtue, and so you're all virtuous people here, and I am very glad to be in your company. Thank you again, and goodbye.